Right. So nice and early. This is our first legend session in the year, and we're really privileged to have Mr. Denzil Phillips, who has, played a major role in the natural products industry across the world, and especially in Africa. But Denzil, tell us about the beginning. You're a London boy, right?
Oh, you're talking about me in general. I was born in England, yes. I'm a London boy with an English mother and an Australian father. Lived and studied economics and tropical agriculture in England. And then from then onwards, it was pretty much Africa for a long, long time. I went to live in Gambia working on nutrition. In fact, I started with nutrition. And in India, I was working for UNICEF, so it was more nutrition. And then it switched more to medicinal plants and natural products. But both of great interest to me. I mean, obviously, there's linkages.
Yeah. So when did you first fall in love with Africa? Because you always tell me about all these stories about when you were in this place and you're in that place, and yeah. When did you actually first come to Africa?
Um, well, I first came because my thesis at Reading University was about nutrition and farm management, right? And it was a very unsatisfactory master's, and I didn't think it answered a lot of questions. So my tutor said, "Why don't you go and do some online, proper research, village level research?" Well, one, I had to look for money for it, but two, I had to find a location to do this, and I ended up in Gambia, and I got a team together, and we went and we spent 2.5 years in 5 villages looking at food systems, measuring and weighing children,
Okay.
doing medical surveys. It was a very ambitious project indeed.
Yeah, but still very important, even to this day, right? Because nutrition is still such an important thing
So
in an
the subject matter was, why are some people fat and some people thin in the same environment? See, and that was interesting. And it was at the time of the Sahel drought area, and we were thinking, why is not everybody drought prone and living in? And
yeah.
some people were doing very well, and others weren't in this very small area. And it was a very, very interesting anthropological look, as well as anything else. So we had a nutritionist, we had
Hmm.
myself, and we did a load of work and went on and on for about 3 years.
So what was the answer then?
The answer was not an answer, really, unfortunately. The answer was, we know very little about nutrition. That was the
Yeah.
first important question, is what works and what. The second major conclusion was that the real problem in the area was malaria.
Okay.
And malaria is the driver to malnutrition.
Okay.
So if
Yeah.
families had a history of malaria, either they couldn't work properly or their productivity was
That's interesting. Yeah. And then you may know this, that 2023 is the year of the millets. So actually that's one of the things that we will be doing quite a lot of during the course of the year. Because I remember that you mentioned that you did some work on sorghum.
And well, these 5 villages that we chose were chosen, and they were in the Gambia River Valley. They were, so some were millet and sorghum villages exclusively. They didn't eat rice, and some were rice eating villages. And obviously, that was one variable we were very interested in, where the rice farmers or the millet farmers better better fed, were they nutritionally better off. And generally, yes, but not for the reasons one would suspect. Yes, the millet farmers and the sorghum farmers were generally better fed than but mainly because the energy consumption to grow rice is much larger than growing millet and sorghum. Something that very few people
Yeah.
sort of look at. It's actually per kilo of product, of energy, of calories, of protein, you get a much better reward from millet, say, than you do from rice. So while
Yeah, and you
rice is
need a
the
lot of water for rice as well, right?
water, more energy, more labor, more everything, more threshing. So so some of these villages, I mean, I grew a field of rice. I mean, I grew some millet. They gave me a field next to the chief of the village where I was living. We had a competition. He was about 75 years old and I was about 25. So I bloody well should win. But it was a close run thing. How many
Wow.
bags? And the whole village
Yeah.
came up. We had a big celebration. But yes, so
Well,
I
last,
know a lot about
mm,
millet.
which kind of millet? Is it pearl millet, finger
Well,
millet?
millet, yeah. Yeah. So
Okay.
we had two types of sorghum, red sorghum and white sorghum.
Mhm. Yeah. So we grew some millet last year. It was very difficult to process afterwards. It's amazing. As you know, we have, yeah. But so the year of the millet is one of the things that will be celebrating. So tell me, when did you then pivot into medicinal plants?
Yeah, it was really short. Not long after that, I obviously got interested there in traditional medicine because there was very little modern healthcare available in the villages. So obviously I got involved in that. And then I was working under the umbrella of this place called the International African Institute, which is an anthropological, very old, attached to the University of London. And I met people who were working. I'd already run into people in India who were working with medicinal plants. And it was actually essential oils and aromatic plants. Because I then
Okay.
went to work for DFID, or the Tropical Products Institute in London, as a researcher. And they
Mhm.
gave me a project on essential oils. And I didn't even know what essential oils were. And it
Yeah.
was a complete new world. And I got fascinated in it and I got interested. And I was one of the sort of first people who were researching the size of the market, and all the different products. And then it grew and grew from there. And then I fell in love with a German lady who had a journalist, and she was given a contract to write a book about perfume. And I got involved in writing this book for this big German company, and we went all over the world interviewing perfumers and doing that. And then I think from there, I got into medicinal plants.
Yeah. So is this book available or it was just an internal project?
No, it was an internal. Well, it never got published, which was the irony, partly because Karen, my wife, got pregnant, and partly because they didn't like what we were trying to say. They wanted a more sort of publicity type book. So it ended up in a series of articles in their very glossy company brochures, company
Yeah.
annual reports. So it never really got published as a book. They did publish a book,
Hmm.
but it was a bit sad. But
It-
I learned huge amount. I mean, I was given access to extraordinary people who were very in the south of France. And I went looking at
hmm.
installation, and then it all rolled from there. And then I got asked to go to work in Pakistan, and they asked me to work on a series of projects there, growing different essential oil crops and also medicinal crops. I remember I went and set up a project to grow senna,
Yeah.
cassia senna,
Mm-hmm.
for a German company. And also I started to grow psyllium, ispagola, psyllium plantago ovata,
Yeah. Yeah.
which uses a laxative. So then I got
Mm.
involved at that stage. As I say, my wife was German. I would move to Germany, and I started to get involved in the German herbal industry.
Okay. So
I
so
think that's when I first probably met Thomas Brendler, because he was working with Schwab, and Uli. They were all connected with the
mhm.
Schwab company, which was down the road from where I lived. And I entered that world of medicinal plants. And it
Yeah.
was we were there. It was nothing like the size of the industry now. I mean, we were, sort of quasi hippies and people. We weren't taken seriously, really. And then I
Mm.
got, I then I started to do a lot of market reading. I went to a lot of times to America. And that's where I met Mark Blumenthal and all the people around Herbalgram and Joseph Brinkman and a whole bunch of Americans, because they really drove the industry. The Germans had always had a strong, phytomedicine industry. There's nothing new to that in Germany, but in America, the natural product industry was created at the time of, Woodstock onwards.
Yeah.
It just exploded from nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Dietary supplements hardly existed before all those. But I used to go to things like the Natural Products Fair in Anaheim, and I gave lectures there about and it just snowballed, and then I set up this consultancy firm called High Value Horticulture with a couple of friends of mine. So they did all the fresh produce. They were working with fruits and vegetables, and I just was responsible for projects related to spices, herbs, medicinal and aromatic plants. Because I've never really bothered about the line between spices, herbs, medicinal plants and aromatic, because
it's all the same.
One is a medicinal plant, for another person it's a perfume, for another person it's a cosmetic, for another person it's a food. Every plant nearly has multiple uses, and these borders that were put up by Western academics, this is a cosmetic plant, this is never really mean anything in a village.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So when you look at Germany and on the other hand, the US, what are the lessons that African entrepreneurs or even African governments can learn about building a natural products industry?
Well, obviously the German one was scientifically based, regulatory approval was, the German system is probably rather similar to the Chinese system, which was, in other words, medicinal plants are part of the health system. Use of medicinal phytomedicines is an integrated part of healthcare, public healthcare. So there's never been a doctor in Germany is taught about medicinal plants and how to use them, and as in China. So there's no boundary between people who are working on allopathic medicine and people who work. Whereas in England and in America, obviously the medical industry or the doctors and the pure pharma, big pharma were very anti the natural product sector, and so there were different people. But the lesson for Germany, is that they research and safety. But in the end, the American industry grew far faster and far bigger, and obviously the Germans started to buy into America, and most of the big German companies, like Schwab, they own some of the biggest companies in the health food industry in Germany. So I think the lesson is, I don't know, one wants to learn a little bit about both, but to me the lesson is from China, really, is that the whole issue of barefoot doctors, having them integrated into the healthcare system, because traditional healers in Africa are not integrated into the health system. And I think as long as that is the case, as long as they're considered on the outside, it's never really going to get as big as it should be. So that's the story. That's how we got involved with AAMPS and the whole idea of pharmacopoeias.
Yes. Okay. So you're like the father or one of the fathers of AAMPS. It is a lot of fathers and mothers. So where does the AAMPS story start? And AAMPS, by the way, is the Association of African Medicinal Plant Standards.
Well, it started because then I was given a job of helping promote small businesses in Africa, Caribbean, and the Pacific. I worked for the European Union in Brussels, a thing called CDE, and I was in charge of their program for herbal medicine or herbal products. Again, it wasn't medicine, it could have been cosmetic, and I was asked to organize 3 conferences, international conferences, and given one in Africa, one in the Caribbean, and one in the Pacific. So the one in Africa was in the year 2000. And I went down with somebody from the Commonwealth Secretariat, which was also involved, looking at what was the African herbal industry in the year 2000. Who was there? Who were the players? And we invited about 200 people to this meeting, which was held at the Botanic Gardens in Kirstenbosch. Yeah, we held it, and there's a fancy little hotel down there. I can't remember the name now, down near Kirstenbosch. Beautiful little hotel down inside. It still exists. And we took over all the rooms, all 200 rooms or whatever it was, and we filled it with all these people from all over Africa. And I think it was the first time that non-academics had come together.
Yeah.
Talk about the African herbal medicine industry. And what came up from that strategy, from that discussion, it was like a 3-day meeting, was the fact that India and China had pharmacopoeias, Europeans had pharmacopoeias, and that's how which are basically quality control standards. And it was from there that their industries grew, and unless Africa had quality control standards, there was no future for growing in the same way. And that's how, and then I got money together from the European Union to start working on this. And we got a lot of these people who were in that original conference, Uli and various other people, and that's where I met Katerere. I didn't know any of these people. I knew nothing of. So it's really my journey with medicinal plants, if you like, in Africa. Not Africa, but medicinal plants. Because I'd been to Africa a lot looking at all sorts of other plants before, and living in Gambia and the millet thing and the nutrition stuff. But year 2000, and then it just took off from there. And I met Charles Wambebe was there, and I was asked to find, who were the key players in the different parts of Africa, who were the movers and shakers in the industry. So in that sense, yes, I was lucky to have the privilege of going all over Africa, meeting these people, bringing them together. We tried to get WHO more involved, and they always kept it a bit of a distance. I never knew why. It was nothing personal, but I just think they thought they were doing their own program. They had their offices in Congo, Brazzaville, or way out in nowhere. They never really actively took the role that we wanted them to. But, and then Cobus Elov, I have to thank Cobus. Cobus was absolutely critical to AAMPS. Because Cobus offered no, actually it wasn't that way. I held a tender for people to do the analytical work. Which organ? And I remember we offered the tender to any company that was interested in, or university. It was the University of Southern Cape in Cape Town, Pretoria, and Nigeria. I think it was Anyway, Cobus won the tender, so I didn't know him, but obviously I saw this tender document, and I had to go down and meet him. And he really put a lot of effort into it. Cobus's knowledge of African, what was interesting about Cobus to me is he was way out of just South Africa. He had students from every corner of Africa. He was known in every corner. And I didn't know. I suppose in the same way, Ben Eric is in a botany way, but not in a medicinal botany. But yes, so Cobus became the chairman, as you know, and drove the thing. I've always wanted to keep behind the scenes. So I'm not even an African anyway, so I was doing admin, secretarial, pushing it forward. So that's how it happened, and it took a long time. We did have money though, and we don't have money now. But we had these workshop meetings. So we did one in Namibia, we did one in Ghana, we did one in Nairobi, and then I moved on. Then I think I met you. Wasn't it at a thing about I thought, well, we need to look at animal nutrition.
Yeah,
Animal,
the ethno-veterinary
no,
meeting in Kenya.
in
I
Nairobi,
see.
yeah. So that was
Yeah,
just a spin-off. Just happened.
yeah,
Again, an idea I had, and I managed to get some money from some big American organization.
hmm
And that, yeah, where I met you, and so it just rolled on.